All right. So welcome everybody. It's about 5 after, so it's a good time for us to get started. Thank you so much for coming by on a Saturday. We got a nice small group here. Not too small, but not too big. So I think it's a pretty good size for us to have some good discussions and questions, and that way we can jump into anything that you guys would like to dig a little bit deeper. Uh, I'm Megan Brodke. I'll be the one that'll be kind of leading the webinar today. Uh, I'm a practice manager for the architecture team at Exceed Consulting. I'm also a Salesforce MVP, Seattle Women in Tech user group leader, community cloud specialist. Been in the ecosystem for 12 years now. I actually started as a customer success manager, became a Salesforce admin, tried my hand at development. It was not my thing. Decided to become what I thought was actually a developer. It's truly an architect. This was long before we had the pyramid, and ended up going to the route of technical architect. I have over 400 Trailhead badges, and as I stated, Community Cloud is my specialty. One of the reasons why I love Community Cloud so much is due to the fact that you can't really have a Community Cloud implementation without another cloud. And so by doing Community Cloud implementations, I get to play with so many other clouds and get to have so much more in my projects that I really, truly enjoyed it. Plus, Community Cloud lets you get to see so much more of Salesforce and this totally different side of Salesforce than you really get to see when you're working internally. Those of you that are working with Community Cloud right now, whether you've been doing it for a while and you've been seeing it for a while, or it's something that you're just getting your first go at, you've probably noticed that it's different. Be it from the fact that you're doing that outward view, so you've got to make sure that you focus on your user experience a lot more, your UI a lot more, or as we're focusing on today, the concepts of sharing. I mean, all the way down to those foundational items, things work differently. And I just find that a lot of fun. I get a real kick out of it. I think it's a good time. It's something new to learn. It's another way to think about things. And I love learning. If I didn't get to do something new and learn something new every day, I don't think I would be in the ecosystem. So that's one thing I love about Salesforce, is that I get to learn something new every single day. And it's definitely kept me going for 12 years already. Sharing in communities, I've noticed more recently that as I start to work on more projects and with people that are getting more involved with communities as communities get more complex and Salesforce adds to that more. Hi, welcome. That we just keep having more and more going on, and that idea of sharing just gets a little bit, it's a little weird for people if they haven't seen it before. And so jumping into that, things that we're going to talk about today are license types and how license type matters. The things that you can do with a customer community license are different than the things that you can do with a customer community plus or a partner license. Customer community plus and partner licenses have more superpowers, as I like to call them, than a customer community license. It's definitely something you want to keep in mind all along during your project, and make sure to get clear from the very beginning. A lot of times I hear that people have jumped in and thought about using sharing rules. Problem with sharing rules is sharing rules have limits. Setting up your org-wide default, going with internal versus your external org-wide default. What are some of the gotchas there? Working with your sharing sets. Account relationships and account relationship sharing, not to be confused with account contact relationships. Jumping into channel programs, channel program members, and then just a little bit of the added sharing that comes with that functionality in and of itself It is not sharing, but there's sharing that goes along with it. And then apex sharing, which is listed last because, as we all know, we should always think declarative first and then go to code. And then to jump straight in, the only thing that I have on the sharing rules slide is the fact that they are limited. And let me jump in here. Great little story. One thing you're going to notice about my slides is I am very big on doing a demo. So we'll jump in and look at pretty much all of these one by one. And after I go through a few bullets, answer a few questions about further what's listed on the slide, I'll jump in and show you an actual use case, how to configure it, and we'll go straight into Salesforce. The problem with slides is you actually don't get to see how things go together. And I personally am a very big, I need to see it person. So I kind of just run my webinars the same way. So just a heads up to you all. But with sharing rules. So when I was working on communities in the beginning, and I've seen this come up a lot throughout community questions. What about using sharing rules? Sharing rules have a great place when you are working with internal users. You can do owner-based sharing rules, or you can do criteria-based sharing rules. But the problem is you end up hitting that maxed out limit of the 50. And as you're going through and you hit that, you've got to think about the number of either users or accounts that you're going to be setting up. And if you have, a large number of community users, 1,000 community users, even 100, 500 community users, or even think about it if you're doing it based on accounts. If you have 500 accounts or 100 accounts, how many people on each of those accounts are you going to make active? Very easily, you're going to end up hitting those limits for sharing rules and figuring out, do I want to share with this person based on this field? And that's one of the things that you're going to end up getting hit with a gotcha at. And so rather than going with the concept of sharing rules and using that type of criteria to share, Salesforce has a number of other features available to you. So that's where the fun comes in with the items such as sharing sets. So not too long ago, about a year ago, Salesforce extended sharing sets to be available to Customer Community Plus and partner users. Previously, they were only available for high volume users, which would be anyone with the old portal style licenses and then customer community licenses. Now they're available for all of the community licenses, which is a huge, huge win for all of us. So what are sharing sets? Have any of you ever used a formula to say that uses the global variables, like the current user, which is a field? So if my user ID or my current email matches a field on a record, then I'm going to make a formula field true. If so, that's very similar to how a sharing set works. What they do is they allow you to take a value off of a community user, specifically using their contact ID on their user or their account ID on a user via the contact.account ID. And it's going to match that up with either the contact ID on a record or an account ID on a record. And if that value matches, then they're able to see that record. And like I said, they can be used by customer community users, customer community plus, and partner users. They should be the first go-to that you use when thinking about sharing. They're the most basic form of sharing that's available. One of the downsides, though, is when you are going through and you are checking if you I know we can't do this yet in Lightning, but that sharing button that's available on Records Classic. If you click that sharing button to see if a record is shared, you actually won't see shares from a sharing set. So just an FYI to you, they won't be visible there. But they're extremely, extremely helpful. And they are also the way to share with customer community licenses. Customer community cannot use the other types of sharings available. So they can't, customer community cannot use Apex sharing, they cannot use account relationships. They don't use any of the other types of community sharing that is available. Customer community licenses can only use sharing sets. There's something to think about there as well, that you have to use sharing sets for the sharing of your customer community licenses. Great example of how this is done. I am going to actually jump over into my Salesforce org now, and let me switch my screen and do share. Can you see my Salesforce?
Yep.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, Gail. Or whoever that was, sorry. All right. So when you are in Salesforce and you jump over, if you're in Lightning, you'll want to go to your feature settings and then go into communities. And this is found under your community settings. You have a few limitations with your sharing sets. So once you're in here, we'll want to scroll down. And again, this is under community settings. And you will notice that you can go in here and click on new. The profiles that you have available, you can only put a profile into one sharing set. So if you have used that profile already, you can't use it again. The downside comes into play with a sharing set if you want to share an object in multiple ways. So if I want to share accounts based on both the parent account field plus the partner account field, you can't do that. You have to pick one field to share them on, which can be a bit frustrating. Some workarounds there are to use automation and to come up with some funkiness, or to have multiple profiles and to see if, can you split people up based on, different profiles for those different levels of visibility. Keeping in mind, what is visible out of the box. They get to see their own account already, for example. But when expanding to other accounts or other objects, things start to get more complex. And seeing as mentioned, customer community, this is the way to share. It takes some strategic planning to figure out what is the right way to go. But to set this up, let's call this our community webinar 11. I have my LastPass on there so that I can't see my things. All right. I recommend creating a sharing set for each profile and naming it after that profile. If you have multiple profiles fit the same sharing set rules, okay. But then one thing to think about is, on a profile level, what is it that is distinguishing these two different profiles? Is it field level security? Is it object level security for public objects? Do you really need to have those separate profiles to maintain if you're sharing record visibility the same way and you have all the same objects in there? Just something to think about. In this case, we are going to go forward with the MVP Customer Community Plus user profile because we can finally do those Customer Community Plus profiles. And then we're going to want to pick which objects we want to share. So in this case, we want to go and we want to share our work orders. And we also want to share the, this is a custom event object. So you'll notice that the objects have populated down below. One of the reasons why I picked multiple is sometimes in Salesforce, when you move stuff over, unless you go to configure it and hit save, it disappears for the first one you did. You can continue to add all of your objects at once here before you have to go in and hit save. They'll all stay there. And then you'll click setup next to that object. And this is where you'll do that matching that I mentioned, and where it's kind of like using those global variables like a formula field. So here you have your user, and you'll notice that you have this contact.related account. That contact.related account is actually for when you have account contact relationships enabled. And so that would be the related accounts for whenever they are in account contact relationships for the contacts to many accounts enabled. And that would be the many accounts that they are visible to, which is helpful. One of the other options that's available to you, for example, if you want to be sharing numerous accounts, is to enable contacts to many accounts. And instead of trying to go up a hierarchy, just to relate that contact to multiple accounts via the contacts to multiple accounts functionality. You also have the contact field, contact.account. Using the account and the account.parent, you're going to want to think about using, when you think about using the .account field, just consider whether or not that field is populated for your users. Not all community users have the .account field populated. It's very often safer to go with the .contact or the .contact.account. If you need to check, you can always run an export of your users to see whether or not your users have that data populated. In this case, we can go with our contact.account. This is going to share the information based on the user's account, so that everyone on the account is going to get that visibility. If we did this based on the contact, we'd be sharing it directly with the contact instead. Then we're going to look at the work order. This is where we match those two fields, and it's when these two IDs match that they get visibility. You're also going to want to make sure you're matching the same type of record. You don't want to match a contact to an account, or you're not going to get the same values. So when the user's contact.account matches the account listed on the work order, then they can have read-write access. You can also limit it so that they can have read only. And in this case, we're going to just hit update. And then for the events, so here to hit setup. And we have, again, let's do, on this one, let's just do the contact field. And this one is just based off the owner of that event record. The reason why is because we don't have any custom fields on that record that relate to a contact or an account. But owners have that account or that contact field that's listed on the owner record. So in this case, they would already have visibility by being the owner themselves. So what we'd really want to do is share it out with their whole account. So rather than do the contact, switch it to contact.account and make it the owner's account. One thing you don't want to do is recreate sharing that already exists. If there's already built-in functionality to grant that visibility, there's no reason to go and build that functionality again and do redundant visibility. Ownership already grants you visibility. This is going to extend that visibility to their account. And this will give read-only access to everyone else and then get an update. One of the reasons why you may want to extend it to their whole account, for example, is if you have multiple roles and you want to make sure every single person, no matter what role the owner is in, gets visibility. And then we'll scroll down, you'll notice that the setup is gone and you now just have edit available there. You still have to hit save, otherwise those two lines are going to go away. And going through, that's what it takes to create a sharing set. So I want to pause for a minute and have all of you have a little bit of time to ask me questions of anything that you guys have about sharing sets, or anything that you have about how to set them up that we just went through.
Well, I did want to ask you, Megan, about, hi, this is Gail. Contacts, you mentioned enabling contacts to multiple accounts.
Yes.
You might want to do that. That's a setting outside of this? Is that what you're saying? Okay.
So I'm a big fan of contacts to multiple accounts. I know a number of companies have gone through with this, some have not. Sometimes when you have contacts that leave an account and switch to another account, people are often, what do I do with that contact? How do I deal with them? Or when you have contacts, like in the case of, the situation I had mentioned of, I need visibility to this account, and this account, but rather than you can't create those multiple sharing sets. And that's actually found underneath your sales settings. I believe it's under account settings. And that's right here, contacts to multiple accounts. And you can just go in there and it's just that little first checkbox to create that relationship.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. I find it helpful for getting that going. One thing to keep in mind though is once you set that up, using sharing sets as that relationship stays, if you keep that relationship, that visibility also stays though. So although it is helpful for keeping visibility, if you keep those relationships beyond the amount of time that they should have that data visible, it can also be a gotcha. So it's a win and a gotcha at the same time. And that actually brings us to the next item, which when we go over the account relationship sharing, I'll actually show you how that comes in to show you a demo with the account contact relationships about how you can use that with parameters and setting up dates and limits. So to actually talk a bit about those, unless anyone else has questions about sharing sets first. All right, let's switch back to the deck. Okay. So account relationship sharing, what exactly is it? All right, so what you are able to do with account relationship sharing is with Customer Community Plus and with partner licenses, you can grant access to records and based on relating them to each other and having a specific field, again, be a user field, contact field, or an account field, similar to sharing sets. However, you're able to put in criteria. So it's like souped up sharing sets, so to speak. Who can use them? Again, this is only Customer Community Plus and partners. This is not available to standard Customer Community licenses. And a situation that when they apply would be when a sharing set doesn't quite do it. You have the account or the contact or user record ID, or lookup, I should say, listed on the record that you want to share, but you have additional parameters. So you want to share this record, however, only when this field has a certain value, or only until 12 months after X date, or only if this checkbox is checked. The way that they are used is going to be best done in a demo. There are a few more steps to this one, so I am going to switch back on over to Salesforce, and we are going to have a fun, I don't know why Zoom keeps opening every time I do that. Okay, we're going to have a fun time here. Scrolling back up. In Lightning, account relationship data sharing rules are found here. One thing to keep in mind is within Classic, they're actually found under the community set, under communities as a sub item. So when we are within here, we want to go through and create that actual rule that we want to use for what is it that's our situation. And so we'll go in here and come up with our rule name, this community webinar. One thing that's really frustrating is the developer name does not auto-populate the new account relationship sharing rules in Classic or in Lightning. Just a heads up to you, you're gonna have to type it in twice. And then test for the demo. So your account relationship type. So you'll notice that there are a few different fields on here. And the type is what type of relationship they have between them. And this actually comes into play for a record that is in use when relating the accounts to each other. So there is actually an update to the page layout that we're going to do next. But you can have multiple account relationships between accounts and different accounts. But this rule will only apply based on this specific type being selected. So for example, on this one, let's just actually leave it as system integrator. Your access levels, again, are read only or read write. Nice and simple. I'm gonna leave this one as read only. Notice a lot of times, communities, you probably end up doing read only for a large amount of your data. Next up is your object type. One thing I didn't mention about sharing sets, but I'll bring it up here about account relationships. Your objects to be in a sharing set or in the account relationship type, they need to be set to private. Otherwise, they're just not going to show up. So in here, I'm going to type in lead because I know that one is one of my private objects. And then these are the fields to match on. We have the owner ID. Like I said, you can have a user, a contact, or an account ID within the account relationships. So on leads, I have fields of converted account ID, owner ID, and partner account ID. In this situation, you'll want to share with our partner account ID. And going through in here, this is where we're actually able to add in that criteria. And we can do that advanced formula. And so in this situation, there's really a formula. It's the partner is listed. Well, I guess we can actually do whether or not it's closed. So let's do closed or not. The scrolling, or converted, I should say. Converted equals false. We'll notice that the scrolling, you can't actually type within these boxes to scroll. Like I tried to do, it's a bit frustrating. Sometimes they're pushed for it though. There's an idea out there on the Idea Exchange. Highly recommend that you vote for it. I will make sure to share that link after the webinar. But it's just the once UI UX situations and make things a little easier to use. So what this will do is now that we've created this rule, it's set up to share based on leads existing with whoever the partner account ID is, if their system integrator and converted equals false when they're related to that record. So we're going to hit save. And then I'm actually going to jump over to the account page layout here, show you how that is set up. And let me jump into accounts. Page layouts. And super fun. Have any of you used account relationship sharing before? Take silence as a no. Okay. So you'll notice right here is where I have this account relationship from. And then I also have account relationship to. Those two related lists are used with the sharing, the account relationship sharing rules. So you'll want to add those to the account page layout to go along with how this is set up. Once those are done, you're actually able to go through and within an account, you can actually go ahead and actually show you how to set up one of the rules. One thing to keep in mind is your accounts have to be enabled. Actually, we'll do that at the end when I have my last slide because I've got all my accounts picked out there. But the accounts have to be the correct type of accounts. For example, you can't be sharing to just your an unenabled account. Otherwise, you end up getting errors when trying to set things up. So that is the actual setup part. At the very end, we jump into a community and show how this visibility actually works. So we'll jump into that part at the end. I don't want to try to switch around my demo. Every time I try to do that, I end up confusing myself. All right, so questions about account relationship sharing. I know it's not the most fun one or the smoothest one to go through all the time. But it's, like I said, it's like sharing sets, but you have to relate the accounts to each other. And then you have that extra step of being able to add parameters. Sounds golden. Okay. Next up, I am going to jump over into the channel programs and channel members. So to tell you about channel programs and channel members. So first off, what are they? Channel programs are actually pretty cool. They're functionality that was released to help out with the partner community licenses. And they allow you to work with your leads and to work with your marketing events and all that kind of thing. But what you're allowed to do with them is you can actually create these different tiers, for example. The way that I always describe them is, for example, you have a gold, silver, and bronze. And with the gold, silver, and bronze, okay. With the gold, silver, and bronze, you're able to put members into each one of these sections. And within that, you then have these different groups. And unlike sharing sets and unlike account relationships, channel programs work a lot more like groups. You're then able to select them as who you share some items with. So let's say I want to share these report folders with people, or this is who I want to add when doing sharing, doing a group of email templates, or who I want to add to any scenario where you have groups show up is where you're going to end up seeing channel members as well, or your channel member groups as well. So it's definitely a nice way to work. They can work with queues, they work with list views, you can use them with folders in any way, and it's helpful. Those ways where you're just able to subdivide and slice your community members into different sections in yet another way. Because groups are great, but what if you want to maintain groups for the exact same thing that you're doing already? And so to jump in, again, these are available for your partner licenses. And when do you use them? Like I said, queues, list view, sharing rules, folders, anywhere where you would use a group. How to set it up. So, switching up my share. And don't hate me for this one. I'm going to go over to Classic. It's just, I gotta tell you, 12 years, you get used to a specific layout for all your stuff. Let me show you where the channel members are so I don't look like a crazy lady searching. Your channel members in Classic are located directly in your communities, right here under channel programs. So here you have your channel program level, channel program members. Here you can do customization and set up the side of items. You are also able to then, once you customize, for example, your page layouts, create all of your sharing, etc., your configuration is actually done on the Salesforce side. So if we jump over, as you are, I only have a couple of things installed, I promise you. All right, so here we have this beautiful, beautiful channel program that was created. And we can actually create another one. Channel plan name. This one is going to be Community Sharing Webinar. And let's tie this again to our love partner of Ohana. Our time period, okay, we'll make it for 2008. And our planning status is new. Enter your GTM, let's just do this test, and hit save. Oh, lovely. All right, so I'm out of data in my org, so we'll look at the existing one. That is how we would create that record. And then here is, all right, I'm getting out of data. Let me switch to my other org, which is right here, just in case this happened. You know you play in your dev org too much, one. All right. All right. Go. Channel program levels. All right. So we wait for this one to load. This one's pretty basic. You end up creating your channel program. Then you create your channel program level, and then you can add members to those levels. Simple as creating Salesforce records and filling out the required fields. Go. All right. So let's do standard channel program first. There we go. All right, here we go. New. What's this one as? Tests or community sharing webinar to be consistent. And then we can put this into a category. Again, these pick lists configurable and setup, just like anything else. Go with reseller, mark this as active, and do webinar test. Hit save. And then you'll notice below is where we have our levels and our members. Here I click the level and I will do gold. And the rank is going to be number 1. I'll follow that up with doing silver. And then I'm going to do bronze below. A lot of companies have their tiers as different. Sometimes within their reseller program, they will have different tiers. Sometimes within their channel programs as well, they'll have multiple tiers. And so they'll end up having, multiple levels within each one of their different types of partner programs, your channel programs. Within there, they'll then have the different groups for their different levels of partners. I use the terms of gold, silver, bronze, platinum often, just due to the fact that that's how Salesforce has their rankings of their partners. It's a lot easier to think about when you think about how it relates to us. And it's a way to think about the channel programs as well. As a platinum partner, you get XYZ with Salesforce. As a gold partner, you get this, and as a silver partner, you get that. And all of those items include, or you get different items based on your ranking. And that's exactly what you're setting up with your channel programs. From here, you're able to add your different members. So, for example, this one I am adding on my channel program, community share, webinar. There's a bronze level. And you add it by the account. So this is going to give visibility to everyone in that account when you share with that group. So here, if I pick, say, the Ohana account, other different, try to switch to orgs. Let's grab the community account, hit save. Oh, that's not a partner account. I think Bob the Builder is a partner account. Yeah. Again, they have to be a partner account to set them up in a channel program. Just like Salesforce partners are the ones that are platinum, gold, silver, etc. Versus their customers being ranked. Salesforce isn't gonna call their customers different levels of gold, silver, bronze. But that's how their partners are going to be labeled. So you relate your partner accounts over. Then when we go over here to the bronze, we'll notice that we see Bob the Builder. And while I'm here, since this is a bit different than the other types of sharing, if I go to, for example, the market folder, hit share, you will notice that I have channel programs and levels groups here. I can share down to the actual level, or I can share with the higher up, just the straight up community sharing webinar as a whole. So do you want to share with the entire channel program, or do you want to share with just an individual level? You get multiple options there. with the channel programs. And again, they work like groups. They're not sharing with an individual user. It's not sharing records. It's more of the sharing of list views and folders. You can use them in sharing rules though. So definitely something to think about if you want to share, you know, based on more a heavier lift of records. Rather than trying to share with every individual account, if you wanted to create a set of sharing rules for your partners to share out, this is a nice way to go to try to not max out. All right, questions about channel programs and all the fun there. And we go with silence is golden again.
So Megan,
Yeah.
what is, so this is really just for the like customer community rather than partner community, correct?
So this is for partner licenses only.
Partner licenses only, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Yep, no problem. Oh, I hit the share button again. There we go. All right. Then next up, we are getting into the crazy, crazy complex fun stuff of Apex sharing. All right. I don't want people to get scared. I'm not going to dive in and throw a bunch of code at all of you. But I do want to take a few minutes to talk about some of the nuances about when it comes to Apex sharing. Some things to think about for Apex sharing are, what are your specific requirements? Can you use any of the previously mentioned declarative requirements? So for example, if there is an account or a contact or a user listed on the record that you are sharing, try to go with a sharing set or an account relationship. If you can make that object public, definitely something to think about as well. And limiting visibility that way. Is there an option, you know, for you to look at flow as well for sharing? So one thing that I did on a project previously was where we had, this was before they had sharing sets available for leads. Leads and opportunities for sharing sets are really new, even newer than the fact that Customer Community Plus and partners can use them. But we had to share leads with a customer. Well, leads weren't in sharing sets. This was before account relationships. Mind you, this was only a year ago. I'm not talking like way back in the day. I'm talking a year ago to tell you how much stuff is changing. So last spring, I was sitting there and I was like, how am I going to share this? We have a partner field and we just need to create a share record. You can actually use Flow to create a share record on pretty much any object. And so based on that field being added, we knew to create a share. But one thing that I had learned from working with developers is that there are a number of situations that are weird with sharing that you have to take into account. For example, you know, an ownership change. If you change the owner of a record, your shares get erased if they are manual shares. So you definitely, and on standard objects, your only option for your sharing type is going to be manual. On your custom objects, you get to create an Apex sharing reason of all your own, and that's going to help you to keep some of those shares with your Apex code. Project I'm working on right now, it's actually going into production tomorrow. Yay! We actually get to do Apex sharing reasons on some of our custom objects where we're not using sharing sets. Also think about your master detail relationships. If you're trying to share your child, but it's on the parent that has the relationship to the the user, via the account or the contact, that's exactly what you need. Because of the fact that it's the parent that controls the visibility on a master detail relationship. So we actually we got to simplify a couple of things that we thought were going to be code there and switch them to sharing sets. It was the parent we got to share on. And then, so we have the ownership changes. That'll recalculate your sharing. Record updates, undelete, create. So all those things need to be taken into account for in a flow and in Apex. So there's a lot of stuff that you have to consider, as well as the fact that, you know, sharing is a very complicated thing to test for as well. I know that the test classes that we have are extremely thorough, just to make sure that we've covered our bases, due to the fact that it's, you know, going through multiple objects and this windy road to get to how a record is visible. The more complex the sharing, the harder it is to test, which is the complex sharing that makes it so you have to go to Apex. So it's a pain, but Apex should always be, you know, as we know, declarative before code, so thought of last. When to use Apex sharing and Apex sharing reasons. Apex sharing reasons only apply on custom objects. Apex sharing applies to custom and standard. You would just use manual for your share reason on standard objects. And like I said, you use them as a last resort, or when your sharing is just too complicated for declarative options. And again, this is only available for Customer Community Plus and partner licenses. You cannot do Apex sharing for customer community licenses. And it's also something you have to consider. What are you trying to do with your profiles as well? So I know that many of us have probably seen the Salesforce pyramid for sharing. Let me see if I've got that one. I know I had it. There it is. I'm actually going to just drop this image onto another slide really quick so that you guys can see it. I should have brought this up before. There we go. So who has seen this pretty picture? Your sharing slide. When you are thinking about your sharing, you've got to make sure to remember, and I love the fact that this doesn't have any of the community stuff on there. This is just the internal pyramid. But no matter what type of sharing you're doing, being in a sharing set, an account relationship share, you're going to use your Apex sharing, none of those items, no matter what you grant access to in your sharing set or what you code for, can grant access to something that is not listed on their profile. They need to have that foundational access before they can get access to it. So first and foremost, they need it on their profile or a perm set. Nothing can override that. Once they get that access, then that Apex can grant them access. But something to keep in mind as well. This is their pyramid, and then one thing I wanted to jump to was how to decide between using them. Before I do that though, I want to jump over and show you just where you're going to find that Apex sharing reason and what that is going to look like for you when you get in there. So, and I just had to get a verification code, and I will show that to you. This, and I'll switch screens. Okay. And set up. Has anyone here done any fun Apex sharing yet so far on their stuff? Awesome. So I always get the quiet group, you guys. Come on. It's okay. No friends here. We can change it up. All right. So can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Sweet. All right. So you will notice on here that let me go search layout, compact layout, field layout. Why am I not seeing it? Where there's a section called Apex sharing reason that is right there. Let's switch to description. Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, so you'll notice right here, we have our Apex sharing reasons. And what those Apex sharing reasons do is they give visibility to, what it is that we're sharing. And when we actually jump over to one of our records that is being shared, so for example, if I jump down and I go into our inspections, I had mentioned before with sharing sets, you're not going to see that when you click that share button on a record to see what was actually done. So one of the differences with Apex, if I jump in here and I click that button and I click sharing, you will see here, this actually says owner share, business account. On custom objects, you're going to decide what that share is and what the criteria is and how you're deciding to do this. You get that flexibility. By having that Apex sharing reason, you're able to use built-in functionality to help leverage you're able to leverage some of the built-in functionality to help you with some of those nuances that Salesforce has, so that you can compensate for when updates happen on a record, so it's not going to wipe out all your shares. So that, when a record changes ownership, that, you're not going to lose everything. You've got to make sure that you're going to leverage Salesforce and that all your code needs to be written properly as well. But that way you're not going to lose those community shares. Making sure you have a good developer with experience in sharing is also helpful. Just putting manual in here is going to be one of the ways that you're going to get a gotcha. Writing Apex sharing on a standard object is a far heavier lift than writing it for a custom object. So one thing to also keep in mind when doing your estimating, because of the Apex sharing reasons and just some of the nuances that happen with those standard objects. And then also just keep in mind limits. The number of records that you are creating for shares should be something that you're thinking about as well. Are you sharing with every individual user, or do you want to share with a group? Depending on the number, if you're using person accounts, you're probably going to end up wanting to share with an individual user. If you're using business accounts and you have a large number of people that are involved, you're probably going to want to end up sharing with a group of some sort so that you don't end up having a share record created for every single person on that account. The number of shares that you have can end up hitting limits. The number of records that can be handled in a batch or that can be handled asynchronously. Both those have limits as well. So just things to consider. Also, the removal of shares when you're working with Apex. If you're doing this based on, a field getting updated, you also have something for when that field gets removed, or for when your parameters are no longer apply. If something is until 12 months after an end date, then you've got to make sure that you've got another script that's going to go through and say when that 12 months ends to remove those shares. So all those different things you've got to make sure to compensate for. Unlike with the account relationship, it would just auto stop because you have that formula there that knows. Sharing sets know to just stop sharing when the field goes blank. Apex, you've got to make sure to code that all in and then write testing for all of it. So the more complex, the heavier the lift, but especially when it comes to sharing, definitely something to think about. Specific questions about the high level that we touched the Apex on. Right. So, I want to talk a little bit about licenses and what exactly is and isn't available for each license. So I mentioned very, very briefly just what you can do with each one of the different types of sharing. Sharing sets are for everybody. Channel programs are available for partners, account relationships, customer community plus and partners. And then you have your Apex, which is customer community plus and partners as well. But there's so much more that is available to you within your licenses and things to think about. When you're working with Salesforce and Salesforce data, also got to think about a few other things related to visibility. You have the ability to decide who should see users. Should users be able to see each other in a community at all? And that can be controlled on a community by community basis. That can be controlled overall. So going to actually do the next little bit, just hang out in Salesforce with you all. So let's do share. And I'm going to jump back to this tab here with my fun stuff. All right, so another item to think about is setting up your roles. So there are two different ways. I love this. I have like my hands up, I'm talking to y'all with my hand motions. You can't see me. There are two different ways that roles come into play with communities. One is how many roles do you want to have? You can have 1, 2, or 3. If you have 1, it's called the user. If you have 2, it's called the user and the manager user. And if you have 3, it's called the executive user, the manager user, and the user. You can't change the name of the roles. They just exist. But there is another role-related item that is out there ends up affecting your sharing. Specifically, if you are doing anything related to the role name or doing anything with roles specifically on business accounts. So if you go into your sharing settings and underneath your org-wide defaults, you will notice that underneath here, down at the bottom, you have these little checkboxes. This one here that says use person role for first user in community account. You'll notice mine is unchecked. What that does is on business accounts, for the first person that is activated as a community user, they get a person account role instead of their actual role related to their account. This gets messy. This gets very messy sometimes. What ends up happening is they get assigned a role that is tied to the owner of their account rather than tied to their account itself. If you are doing anything that looks up that user's role or that checks that user's role for anything, it ends up making their data a little messy. And if you are using that for validation within sharing, it'll change their visibility immediately. And then again, once another user is created. So just something to think about. It can definitely wreak some havoc on your design. So something to consider while you're doing that build. Also, items related to your guest user. So a lot of times people talk about their customer community plus licenses, their customer community licenses, their partner licenses. People often forget that there is an entire other user that exists within their org. That user is very difficult to get to, but they exist. And so if you actually jump into any one of your communities, and we're going to jump into one of my super fun communities right now. So, and people wonder how I end up building up so many tabs throughout the day. Let's go to my builder. You may have, I'm sure if you've built a community before, you've probably had to edit your guest profile, either to grant them access to functionality or remove access to functionality. If you're working with your first community, this is definitely the time to learn about where to find your guest information. So this is one of my demo communities that I like to play with. And you'll notice here on the sidebar under settings, we have customer community profile. Salesforce allows you to have an unauthenticated community in any org. To authenticated orgs, you need an actual license for, but any org can have an unauthenticated community. And that unauthenticated community needs a guest license, as do all authenticated communities. You'll notice here that this user is actually site guest user, customer community. Every community gets their own guest user. This profile actually controls everything that my guest user gets to do and all the functionality that they have access to. They have the ability to execute flows, what objects they can see, etc. And what they're able to do here can be a very touchy situation. So you need to make sure that when you are planning your community build, not only are you making sure that you are deciding which pages are properly covered as login versus unauthenticated, but that you're also properly updating the guest profile for that access. In addition to the profile, under community settings, you can decide new functionality of new records created by guest users to the default owner. Records created by actions do not go through assignment rules, for example, leads, cases. So those will just stay with whoever created them. But now in addition, there is new functionality for all records to be able to switch the owner to the community owner. And this is great. And I'm staying with a guest or not getting reassigned can be very messy and very problematic. So definitely something to consider turning on and playing with. Recommend testing it out. Guests don't have visibility into their records anyway. It's one thing to give, if you give them create and read, it's fine, but who should really be seeing those? Who should they be getting assigned to? I definitely recommend checking this out and finding out what works for you and your situation. I know that for the actual implementations that I have done, that since this came out, I have been checking this box. In addition, You have the opportunity to use standard external profiles for self-registration. I like to use custom profiles rather than the standard profiles with self-registration. You're also able to then jump in and decide, now they can run flows, but which flows should they be able to run? What should they be able to do? And then deciding within your actual community builder on that page by page basis, which pages should be public and which should require a login to keep that guest user from seeing items they shouldn't. So in addition to blocking them from objects, you can block them from pages. So that guest user, making sure you check with, either internally, if you're in-house or if you're a consultant, make sure to check with the security team and IT to find out what their requirements are so that you don't end up overexposing data to the guests. Going back, another item that often comes up is reports and how much data should be exposed. Customer community users cannot see reports. You can give them all the check boxes you want, they will not be able to see them. But your customer community plus and your partner users can. You also have the option to give them the ability to export report data. You want to also consider so you can give them the permission to run reports here. There's also the ability to do that on the profile level, but they cannot edit reports in Lightning, even if you give them access to the report builder. They can change filters that you have already set up, but the only way that they're actually able to do full-on report changing and build reports out is if you were to do something custom, or if you were to build a Visualforce and tabs community. It's roadmapped. I mean, eventually Lightning communities will be able to do, or Lightning communities will be able to do what Visualforce communities can do. It's just that doing all of that, it takes time to build everything to support that. I know that Salesforce is working on getting us everything that we keep asking for. So just something to think about. But customer community just cannot see those reports. Just not an option. It's also an advantage. So think of it that way. When we are building communities, so as I switch over to my community builder tab, wrong tab thingy. If I were to put the standard reports navigation within this navigation bar and put that standard report list page up here, a customer community license user would not be able to see that link within the navigation bar, which means, since we cannot have dynamic navigation based on an assignment for a user, I actually find it a win so that I can put that up there without having to do, some sort of custom component for navigation, having developer time there. So something else to consider. Also jumping in and considering visibility to contacts on one's own account. Should users be able to see contacts in general, should they be able to see contacts that are not enabled as community users? This is, again, another new piece of functionality when it comes to sharing and visibility. This was not there before the last release. We are now able to decide, can they only see contacts that are community users, or should they see all contacts? When dealing with a customer community, you can definitely see having this box unchecked. If dealing with partner communities, I can definitely see having it checked because partners often want to reach out to people that may or may not be community members. All depends. And then doing separate sharing to decide which contacts those partners could see. Something to consider. And then the last item that I wanted to make sure to go over before I jump back to the deck relates to cases. You have the ability to reach out to Salesforce, have them turn off case visibility, the standard case visibility that comes with communities. When you are working on your community, there are some basic out-of-the-box functionality that comes with your cases. For one, you are able to see cases based on the fact that your contact is listed on there. In addition, you're also able to edit those cases if you're a customer community plus user. You can have this disabled, and you can also have it disabled so that the people in the role hierarchy do not have access to that case, and then set it up so that it has to be granted based on a manual share or Apex managed sharing. So what you would end up having to do is some orgs have this out of the box, some of them do not, and this would be to go in and check to see if you have within Salesforce under the sharing settings and and again, it's in this lovely edit button. I love how my dev org has 10 million objects for you guys to scroll through. Way down at the bottom, there's this grant users access to related cases. You may or may not have that checkbox. I've come across a couple of orgs that just don't seem to have it. I'd say about 98% of them do though. If you don't, just make a case. And then from there, if you check it, they can see them. If you don't check it, then they wouldn't be able to. And those are the main items that really stand out to me for sharing settings and sharing functionality across licenses. Again, that one specifically applies to customer community plus licenses. Want to make sure that that one was clear for the case sharing. The other item that I want to go over to before I do a dive into questions is making your decision about what type of sharing to use. So for me, this is kind of my methodology that I use when I'm thinking about sharing. So first off, can I go public? Is this an object where I can control visibility merely based on perm sets or profiles? If so, then just go public and use org by default and profiles and perm set assignment. From there, if that's not an option, I take a look at the actual record itself and decide, is there a lookup on the record? And then if so, is it a yes or no based on that lookup? If so, I want to use a sharing set. Also, is the licensed customer community? If so, sharing set. And then do parameters, if there's a lookup on there, do parameters apply? Is it a lookup with just a simple rule of, is converted equals false? Or, type equals customer. If that's true, then I'm gonna go account relationship. You'll notice I already ditched all my customer community license users on the last question. So I already know that my users have to have customer community plus or partner. Next up, I'm going to think about whether or not the sharing is complex. If so, I'm going to go with Apex sharing. If I was trying to share a folder or a specific report, if I'm trying to do, any of the items related to what I would use the channel programs for. We can take a look at using channel programs, take a look at using a public group, maybe share with individual users if it needs to be on a one-off basis, and start looking at those options. But again, that's more sharing non-records. We're looking at sharing specific records themselves. Then we're looking at the sharing sets, the account relationships, as well as the Apex sharing. One thing I don't want you to forget about also is the fact that you still have some of your built-in functionality available to you. You still have case teams. You still have the partners related list on opportunities. You don't have to lose that. Case teams come in extremely helpful, and in making sure to use that, using your contact roles on opportunities for partners. Whatever you make sure you're leveraging what's already there before you jump to custom. I know that I've gone through and I've actually done projects before where we've decided that it was just too complicated to try to do things with going out of the box. And by out of the box I mean declaratively. And then hindsight is 2020, where I look back and I go, oh, I learned so much from this project. And now thinking back, we should have used the code to, add members to a case team, or, we should have, populated this field and then done a sharing set rather than going through and doing overly complex things. But then again, thinking back, customer community plus and partners only just got sharing sets. So populating fields only recently became available. And case teams, they're one of those things that often get forgotten. Don't forget about them. They can be your best friend. If they're not being used right now, try to bring them up, see if they're an option. They have great functionality and great options. And they also help you with, leveraging what is already there so you don't have to reinvent that wheel. Always try to see what you can do with what you have before you try to go and rebuild it again, or try to redesign something that Salesforce built within one way. And there are already, millions of people using it that way successfully for a reason. It may not be the perfect use case for you, and that's fine, but at least try to find out what is it about the out of the box that won't work for them, and find out if it's, something like terminology, or if it is more so just fear, or if it's truly something that doesn't work. Because sometimes, you'll end up finding out that maybe it's just lack of knowledge, or maybe it's just the fact that somebody was told declarative won't work, so they think it won't work. And so learning about new options and being able to combat what those questions are with useful information ends up, helping you and helping everybody else involved as well. Nobody likes an overly complex one. Everybody likes their day to go easier and not have to troubleshoot code. So the main items that I think about when I think about sharing. Now, we have more time, as much time as you all need for questions. And so that brings up my slide for questions, either about sharing or about communities in general.
I have a question. Can you go back to your the setup for communities, the options in Salesforce you were looking at before?
Which one?
just flip back over to Salesforce?
Oh, Salesforce. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. New share Salesforce. It's fine.
Yeah, we weren't there in the community options. So I was wondering about the hierarchy of,
Yes.
so if you set up sharing sets, but then you've also clicked some of those options for the roles, I guess it was.
Yeah.
What
Absolutely.
takes precedence and how can, it looks like you could potentially have conflicts or screw it up.
Yeah. So if you were to do a sharing set, and let's say I am above you in the hierarchy, and there is a sharing set for your profile. So you get shared with, but then I am above you in the profile, so I get to see your stuff. Yeah. So they both go.
Okay.
They both are at play.
Okay, so if I allow community users to see contacts, but then I have a private, I don't know, I can just see, just like, I'll have to go through it carefully.
Oh, so yeah, so that actually kind of goes back to the slide on. Let's jump back to this one. So that goes back to this one. You only add to Salesforce visibility. You cannot take away. As be it as long as my profile has access to that object. If you are below me in the hierarchy, I will see what you see. So it will only just increase my visibility to what you see if I am above you in the hierarchy. If you have the sharing rule to see your records, I am above you, I will also see that because I have it checked on my profile. However, if I have a different profile than you that does not have that object, I will not see it. So they work together rather than blocking.
Oh,
so it'll just
perfect.
continue to expand. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It ends up being I think an advantage. The ways that I have used those together before is, for example, I had a project where I had executives that needed to see more than the standard users. And this was quote unquote the executive role. There was the user, the manager, and the executive role. The executive role needed to see more than the regular users. We actually made a different profile for the executives to share based on a different field. That allowed us to assign them a different profile and give them a different sharing set. They were able to see everything the people below them saw, and then we were also able to expand their visibility with a different sharing set. So it was a nice way to actually give that dual visibility for those two fields because we shared with the account. So everybody got to see everything for both. Well, yeah, kind of mushing two projects together, but yes, you're able to, so if you actually have two different profiles, you could share with the full account for two different fields by selecting the user.contact.account and then picking those two different profiles and sharing on two different fields, and then just making sure you have proper assignment of your records through those fields.
But I thought you said you really want to have only one sharing set to one profile.
So they had different sharing sets because they had different fields they had to share off of for the same object and different profiles. So what we did here, let me switch to Salesforce to kind of give you an example. That'll make more sense. Like I said, I'm a visual person. So let's do this on this one. So we had, for example, on this one, let's just use the partner community user. And let's do this one as partner community user share. And let's do this. I'm not going to have like the same lookup fields as my project, but let's just do case, for example. And hopefully this has multiple lookup fields. So let's do user.contact.account. And then this one we shared based on the, let's just say for this example, the account field that is listed on the case, and gave them read-only. So partner community user, if their contact.account equals the case account, they get read-only. And then I'm gonna hit save. And that's one user. Then created a second sharing set, and let's make this one for this custom customer or partner blah blah blah, partner community login user. So let's pretend this is for the executive. They also got visibility to cases. They had a second profile, and then we did this one based on their contact.account. So again, this is going to share whole account. This time we shared off of the parent.account field, and we gave them read-only. This way we were able to share with the whole account both ways, or both users, or both types of users on the accounts, types of data, two different places in the hierarchy. We were able to bridge that gap, get that visibility for that object for two different fields, but in two different places across the whole account. So two different users, two different profiles on the same account can share records in two different ways. And it kind of bridged a gap that they had because they wanted to share data based on multiple fields, but they only had customer community licenses. And so they had kind of backed themselves into a corner. But this gave them that second level of sharing without having to upgrade their licenses. And because we picked the account instead of the contact, it gave visibility to everybody instead of just one person. It was helpful. It ended up going over really well. It expanded things, not 100%, because mind you, they had to be, their value had to match that field. And we had to have that visibility, limited base record data, but it was far better than trying to go through and have everybody in one profile and them trying to figure out how to rearrange all of their data. You have to figure out the entire data migration project. Again, sharing sets, they have limits, but you can find creative ways to work with them. And then whatever you end up doing, be for hierarchies or for adding additional sharing for multiple users, if you have different profiles and doing different sharing sets. If you open things up more, or if you end up having that data cross, it's never gonna block somebody. You're always gonna be only able to open sharing up more. You can never take visibility away.
Thanks very much, Megan.
Yeah, no problem. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you all. I really appreciate you all being here. I think this was a fantastic time, and